Hopefully we don't get it.
All right, so this is the Intro to Game Dev Workshop on Foundations of Blank. And in this workshop, we'll have one person from each of the officership departments kind of talk about what they do in the team for development. That's the best way to put it. So, as you've noticed by now, your team has lots of different members with lots of different roles. And so we want to come and give you each of our different viewpoints on the role itself so that you know how to work with them and you know what they are working on in your team. And so yeah, this is kind of like a crash course of these roles. And hopefully that you will know the concerns that your teammates have, as well as being open to what they are saying and some of the ideas they'll come up with for the project you guys are working on. Sound good? Any questions? All right. Oh boy, that's right. They have this thing.
Move. Next one. Next. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, I mean we only have one person, so that's technically the one group. They were supposed to group up in like their different departments.
I see.
But you have your own group.
Artists.
Yeah,
Right? Is that how it works?
Do you want to do writing?
Shit, mine's artist.
So let's go. Let's just skip over to writing.
Okay. What's it mean for again?
Intro to game dev.
I think it's all the way at the end.
Everything everyone needs to know. Riley, take the wheel.
Okay, so hi, I'm Riley, and I am the writing director. And so for this workshop, I'll be talking about what we do as writers for this club and in our groups, and what you can expect from us writers and what us writers should expect. We writers should expect. Grammar. So, pictures worth 1,000 words, but together they make more sense. We describe things, we add things. We are the ones who are making stories and explaining what's going on. We work with the visuals. The visuals sort of accommodate what we make, and we accommodate what the visuals make. Let's see. So yeah, where writing is relevant in our club, we handle, say, the base concept. What's the story behind the game? Why are we going from point A to point B? Why are we hopping on these platforms? We can make a plot. Some things happen while we're jumping on these platforms. We can develop a world. Where is the game taking place? How does that tie into maybe our mechanics? What technology do we have access to? And we can help develop characters. Who are the people that we're playing as? Who do we care about? Who are we fighting? Some things that you might be less familiar with in terms of what writers can do for our games would be user interface. All the words that make up all of our menus, these are things that we writers should consider, trying to make those succinct, but also making sure that they get across the information that they need to get across. Flavor text, descriptions, making items and parts of our world that make sound more interesting. It's just a nice little space to add some writing to. And then scenes and dialogue especially. That's a really big place to try to add story to our games. A big point that I want to make about writing in our games is that it's a highly collaborative process. Writing oftentimes has direct ties to design, art, audio, and programming of a game. So what I want to say is we writers can't work in vacuum. We cannot say this is the tale of a woman out for revenge and she has a laser sword. If she has a laser sword, well, we have to consider how does that affect gameplay? What does it look like? What does it sound like? How do we make it work? So me as a writer saying, I have this character who's out for revenge, she has a laser sword, means my programmer has to add the mechanics for a laser sword, the designer would have to design how it fits in with the gameplay, we need an artist to make the asset for it, make it look pretty, and then we would need an audio person to make it have some really cool lightsabery sounds, or whatever non-trademarked laser sword you would like. As a result, communication is really important for both writers and people working with writers. Writers should not try to surprise your teammates with, oh yeah, and this character dies at the end, or, and this character is secretly evil. These are things that you want to be open about. So right from the start you would say, oh, this character will be evil later, so let's change the color scheme to match. Things to be mindful of. Also, a problem that writers will have, and mostly everyone else will have, is scope. If I'm telling the epic tale of this lady who's out for revenge, and it's a 5-act play, that's out of scope. So It will be very easy for us writers to get carried away and be like, well, in order to make this story make sense, I want to have 10 levels. And then that just doesn't make sense. So non-writers probably try to make sure that your writers are in scope. Writers, keep scope in mind. Yes?
So I can't create Lord of the Rings, the game, based off of the books entirely?
One more time?
I can't create the Lord of the Rings game based off the books solely.
Well,
It's been done.
it could be done, but I wouldn't encourage
word
it.
for word.
Word for word, maybe less so.
Is it a visual novel?
Yes, so things like making a game of Lord of the Rings, the book, word by word, would not be within scope, most likely. That's all for that. So yeah, so that's basically it for writing. If you have any other questions about writers, and we do good stuff, yeah. So yeah, any questions about writing? If not, I'll hand it over to whichever department else wants to go. Yes?
Do you, in scope, in terms of like projects that we do every quarter, how much writing typically takes place in one of those projects? Like what level of scope is reasonable for a quarter-long project?
So the question is, what level of scope is reasonable for writing in the context of our club? The answer is it depends largely on your team. If you are on a team with a very competent programmer, designer, like a team that knows what you're doing and a team that knows each other, you can go pretty far with your scope, right? If you like know what you're doing. I would say most often with our projects, we don't have that ideal case. People are learning, and that's great. That's ideal, right? So in these cases, oftentimes the scope that we'll get to is probably coming up with the base. We'll probably get to the base concept, right? And maybe our characters, and if we can fit in the dialogue system, maybe some dialogue, and then also UI, and depending on the game, maybe flavor text, right? So generally speaking, our projects, not a lot, which isn't ideal. Some game projects can be exceptions. People have made visual novels, very heavy on writing. So certain game genres can get further than others. I would say like platformers are a weird one because it's like then you have to get them programming the platform, but then also you have to stick a dialogue system in there somehow, or get text on the screen. So it can be a challenge to get writing in our games that is within scope. Does that answer your question? Great. Any other questions about writing?
That's where the last game you had like 2 or 3 visual novels.
Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, so like one genre over another isn't like, there's nothing wrong with like making visual novels if you got a lot of writers. That's playing to your strengths. So things to be mindful of. I will say it can be difficult if you're working on a team with multiple writers because obviously, yeah, too many cooks. One way you can get around that is, say, if you are making like a visual novel, having different writers can handle different arcs or different branches or different characters. Maybe not so much characters. It depends on the type of game.
Or they become one.
Or they become one. They fuse. Yes, the writers fuse into a single mega writer. Yes. All right. If there are no other questions, I will hand it over to the next department representative.
All right, from here on out, we'll go through alphabetical now.
Not starting with audio, no.
Yeah, not starting with audio, but...
I mean, you could probably just start with design. That'd take the entire time.
Fine, whatever. Whatever.
Do you want to go next?
Sure.
I can let you go next. Oh yeah, here it is.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Alright.
We had to go backwards.
Alright, here's what you gotta know about art. See? Alright, so how the nature of this club works is that when a game requests art, it goes through this middleman called Artstream. What that can do is and that's good in a lot of respects. It does help art, help the art production be more organized and more productive. But what's a byproduct is what happens is that teams don't get aren't as readily able to communicate with their artists, and what that can do is make it they don't get enough input. There's not enough communication between both parties, and in the worst case scenario, the art that they make doesn't turn out what you want it to be. And but if you want to circumvent that, it's definitely possible, if not highly encouraged to do that. And the main component of doing that is is talking to your artists, the ones people working with you. Examples on the ways to do this is to give references. The key is the more clues you give to your artists on how their art works functionally, the better they'll be at doing creatively. Like just knowing how, say, an enemy, how the enemy behaves and how it should work in the game gives a lot of reference for the artist to make it how you probably want it to be. Besides creative references, also technical references. So measurements, like what is the pixel size are you looking for? What's the unit size you're looking for? If you this sounds pretty integral, because if you don't give this to the art and they just guess, then your art's going to end up being at a scale you probably don't want. It's going to be like either too big or too small or whatever the fuck. So this is something that the art department really stresses when a team requests art, that you give us your measurements of how big you want the image to be. And the last component is time, because when it comes to creating anything, producing anything creatively, you need time to hash it out and get rid of all the kinks and make it look nice. So if you're I understand why people could be a little frustrated if things take too long. We try to make our art production as fast as possible. That's the reason why Art Strike is a thing. But just make sure you're communicating with your team, and let's see, communicate with your team. It's like understand what their workflow is and just give them time to do that sort of crap. All right, here's things you don't want to do. Oh yeah. You don't want to scale art ever because it looks disgusting. You can do it for placeholder art if you want to, just so that it works. But when an artist sees their art scaled up or scaled down, and you see like the proportions are off and it's squished and nasty, just like that's a big pit in my stomach. I put in my heart, but the pit. I don't like that shit.
You have a question?
Yeah. That sucks too.
Really?
Yeah. Well, things especially for pixel art, but also 2D art. Whenever you scale anything, either up or down, creates this warping.
I know, like, when you
effect.
scale up, it's gonna, like, pixelize and get full.
Yeah.
Like, when you scale down,
It does a different but still equally nasty thing if you scale down. And maybe you wouldn't. Maybe it's harder for you to grasp, but the artist can tell.
especially the low resolution.
Yeah.
When you're pixel art, scaling down is basically impossible.
Yeah, that too.
Not with this one.
That too. Yeah. 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 Riley.
Are there some programs that let you scale art and like not resize art in a way that preserves the visual quality?
In the case that you do need your art scaled up or down, you have to ask your artist to do it. Even if it's as easy as like going, so like some other program, like a drawing program, right? Even if it's as easy as going to the program and just like change the image size, and maybe that'll look nice. Oftentimes, might be some modifications required to make it like look the same as it used to. But you don't want to do it inside of Unity. That's a bad idea. Let's see. Second off, this is pretty self-explanatory. We need, so back to the first slide. One of the main components we need to make good art for you guys is time. And so if you request something in the last minute, we're not gonna get that shit done. We're not gonna make it look nice for you. It's not gonna work. So, in the very later ends of the quarter, it's basically impossible for us to complete art for you on time. Basically week 9, week 10. It's not gonna fly. Oh. And last thing, our policy here at art is that we prioritize art that's been implemented functionally. So if you have a placeholder for an enemy or whatever, then we'll work on that first. If it's not been put into the game, then we try to avoid it for this very reason, that we don't want to make art that no one's going to use, because that's just a waste of our time. We'd rather be working on things that will be put in the game immediately and having it be workable immediately. Oh yeah. So you're talking about like, you know how we're talking about scaling art and how it gets even worse when it's pixel art. Because pixel art is a very like measured science of an art. Pixel perfect, all right? It's gotta look pixel perfect. And so it might be fewer pixels on the surface, but there's a lot of technical understanding you have to know, both art-wise and programming-wise, to make it look functional. So if you're looking for like an easy out, if you're programming or in good faith you want to make the art easier on the artist, then pixel art is not usually is not a good way to go. It's not like an excuse to do that. But if you but as a designer or as a game team, pixel art, if you really want to make a pixel art game, and you think you think it's not even that much it's not too much understanding for you to get it done right. But if you do have that knowledge, you're willing to learn, and you want to put pixel art in your game, then you're free to do so. Because there are some pixel art games that look really good. I mean, I personally really like to make pixel art. So when it's done properly, then that's good with me. It's good with me. All right. Oh yeah. Okay. So, so the nature of how art production works is that because you have this middleman and there's not this direct communication with your team, then it could feel to artists that they're being pigeonholed into just like do an art job and then you're thrown out and then you're done. So when you can, try to involve your artist in as much of the creative process of making the game as you can. And what that means is that allow them to make artistic decisions on their assets or the direction of your game aesthetically. And just like allow this and try your best to show to create this constant channel of communication between you and your artist. Stuff like showing your artist how their art looks in the game is a really good motivator. It's like, oh man, I've made art and it's working in the game. I want to make more art. That kind of thing. Let's see. What's that? Oh yeah, there you go. Oh my gosh, you use my art as the blah, blah, blah. Alright. So yeah, the basic gist of it is just speak with your artist a lot, get involved in Art Strike, make requests early, be specific about what kind of art you want, what like technically and aesthetically, while also allowing artists some say in the creative process, basically. Any questions? Any questions? Nah. All right. Who's next? Who's next?
That's me.
All right.
Let me move this back over. Hello.
Hi.
For all those who don't know me, I am Sean, one of the design officers. Sorry, Henry. That was Henry, by the way, who was speaking before me. So yeah, I will be talking to you about how us designers work within your dev process. We're just UI artists, right? We're just graphic designers, right?
We're in VGDL.
Yeah, according to VGDL lore, we are. That's what we are, graphic designers. End of slide. No, we're not. We are the people responsible for the player's experience. So we help craft the game's mechanics, the levels, or any other content that the player may interact with, because we want to give the player as fun of an experience as possible. Now, just a little disclaimer, fun is a very, I guess, contentious word in design circles because it could mean many things. But how we'll use the definition of fun is that it gives the player a positive play experience. Because lots of games approach this fun, quote unquote, in different ways. Communication with the team is also important for us designers. We want to help the whole team create the same vision for what the game should look like. We are not the dictator, so for any designers out there who think that you are the idea guy and that your ideas are the only ones that count for your team, I want you to stop that, because we are all a big family in game dev, and we want to make the same fun game. And so it's impossible, my bad, let me rephrase that. we want to help talk with our teams and make sure that everyone gets a say in how the game should be developed. And us designers will help shape that feedback into a fun experience. So, one of the most important skills, as I mentioned, is communication and listening. Whether that be the players, or your team, or anyone else who might want to have some input in the game that's being developed. Us designers, we need to be able to listen to feedback and be able to communicate our own feedback in an articulated way. We can do this through like writing. We write game design documents so that we can communicate to non-designers in ways that we want a game being implemented. So like we might tell our programmers what technical things we may need. We might need to tell our artists what things should look like. We might tell the audio people what kind of like auditory experience we want the players to have, like lots of different things. And us designers need to be able to communicate these ideas well to the team. And also, we also communicate our ideas to the players. We want our players to be able to listen and see the things that us designers are creating inside the game itself. So that is also our job. We're not just communicating to our team, we're also communicating to our players. So that's why it's also a very important skill. Any questions so far for like what us designers do? If anyone's a non-designer, maybe they're curious. No? All right, we can move on then. So, some things that your designers and your teams might be thinking of is learning. How does the game help the player learn to play the game? Are we doing anything that might distract from the experience? You know, these are all different things we might need to iterate upon on. And so, hopefully, like we're not being too annoying to our programmers if we need to keep constantly changing things. I know, right? Sorry. But we're just trying to create the fun experience. So there's lots of iteration as well when it comes to design. Feedback, we mentioned this before. Is the player being rewarded for succeeding in your game? Are they encouraged to overcome failure? Are they? Do we want the game? Like, are we allowing the player to pick up the game again after they lose? Does the game encourage the player to play in a fun way? So are we like creating enough space for the player to have fun in their own kind of way? We're in charge of choice and agency. What choices do we give the player in the game? Is it a genuine choice? Is there a right answer to this choice? Do these decisions affect gameplay? So these kind of things that we want to make sure our players feel like they have an impact in our game. Challenges. Where does the game challenge the player? Does the game help the player overcome those challenges? And are these challenges rewarding to overcome? So we want to make sure that we give our players enough of a push and pull experience as well as choices and learning to make sure that they are having an experience that is satisfactory to their playing over time. And of course the experience, as I mentioned many times, does the core gameplay make the player feel, how does it make them feel? How do the choices also make them feel? And are there moments of catharsis? So these are all kind of points that refer back to our previous subsets of topics. Like we give them the challenge, we give them feedback, we give them choices, and through all these different things, does it add to the experience? Do they feel good for overcoming these challenges in the end? Do they feel sad or happy? Or do they feel frustrated when they're playing our game? These are all different things that we have to look at as designers. And the choices that your designers may be making are all impacting these different things. So anyone in the audience, was there a game you played recently? Think of a game you played recently. And like, did it help you learn? Did it help you like learn over time? Did it give you feedback? Did it give you choices? Was it challenging? And how was the overall experience?
I actually got back into playing Dark Souls. I got it on the Switch. And I'm kind of rusty on it, so I kind of like. So I did play it before, but not playing it for like years, and I'm coming back to it again after forgetting a lot of like the reflexes and the mechanics and stuff. Yeah, like going through the tutorial again and like remember, oh yeah, this is how I do things. Oh yeah, like how like level design works, enemy placement works, all that stuff. It's like in the early stages of the game, I'm on right now. Oh yeah, this is how the game's meant to be played. And it was through playing that first part how I remember it.
Yep, Dark Souls is a pretty good way to fill in this cookie cutter kind of design process that we have.
Yeah.
And the designers did work on a lot to make sure that the player has that moment of catharsis. That's the main thing with Dark Souls. So it's challenging to the point where the player wants to overcome it.
I got stuck on the big bull boss, the second one you fight. I was stuck on it, and I died like 5 times. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, this is the second boss in the game. I beat 50 other bosses, all these games. I just can't beat this one. Well, when I did beat it, yeah, it did feel really great. Oh shit, yeah. Alright. I learned again.
Do you have an example?
Theory,
Theory?
yeah. Yeah, have you ever played, has anybody ever played Theory?
Fury. Oh, you mean the boss rusher game?
Yeah.
Man, I didn't play that.
I think that's a really good example of just like, just fundamentally just learning the patterns of each boss, getting stage through stage through stage, and then eventually beating said boss. And it happens to be very flat. You get knocked down with the rules, genetic too, something like that.
Yeah. So, that makes everyone else aware that these are the things that we are looking for in design. So games like Dark Souls, Fury, like the designers of those games are making sure that they are like making the perfect experience for the player, keeping all these things in mind. And the reason I bring this up is because we also have concerns with designs. And so if there's something in the game that might ruin the experience, or we have like a problem in the game's design, we need to be able to fix those things and iterate. And why that might be kind of a hard thing to work with is because if us designers are constantly changing things over time, then it might also ruin the dev process or kind of annoy people like our programmers, artists, who we have to constantly change certain things. Maybe we need to expand a level size. So you have to come back to the artist and be like, hey, I can't scale this art, right? But I need to make things bigger or smaller. So these 100+ art assets, what I do. or our programmers are like, or we have to come up to our programmers and be like, oh, we need to add this thing because, we tested something similar and this is nice. Can we have this?
Oh my god.
So this is the stuff that us designers have to go through. So we also, as designers, we should be mindful of our teammates, because if we ask, for too many changes, then it's just going to be bothersome. So things like prototyping early and like fixing smaller things that will get stuff done. I'm sure that the producer later on will talk to you guys about scope, but that's also something we should be mindful of, because we don't want to make something that's too dependent on too many different things and then have to cut down later on. So yeah. So us designers, just make sure that you're also nice to your teammates and they'll be nice to you back, and just make sure you're designing adequately with your games, and then everyone will be happy. Any questions about designers as a whole before we move on to the next one? All right. Audio. Come on.
I'm gonna sit because sitting is comfortable.
Just make sure the mic is able to pick you up.
I should move it.
You can move the mic down if you need.
Yeah, Henry, where do you have the microphone?
Yeah, over here.
Over there. Okay. Oh boy. This way. A lot of noise. Okay. Hello. In case you don't know me, I'm Kristen. I'm the audio director. I'm going to be talking about the audio department. So first, we're going to break down sound or audio design and exactly what it is. So we actually split audio into 2 different fields. We have music composition, where we actually write the music for games. And we have sound design, which is actually creating sound effects and a lot of other things in between. In this club, we use the term audio designer generally to refer to someone who does both. I know that in Audio Strike, there are some people who prefer to do only music composition, for example. So there are some people in the club who only prefer to do one or the other. Music composition is pretty straightforward. You're writing the music, but sound design can be split into different fields in itself. Like sometimes, like maybe you're a Foley artist and you go out into the real world and record sounds for your video game, right? Or you're making things from scratch in a digital audio workstation. Or you're working with voice actors and you're recording voiceover and processing it in some way. So there's a lot of different ways you can break down audio design there. So in practice, in the real world, people can be only composers or only sound designers, or they could be a combination of both. I personally considered myself a combination of both. I like both composing music and creating sound effects. Any questions so far? Cool. So how we go about creating audio assets is we usually use a digital audio workstation, such as FL Studio or LMS, Pro Tools, etc. There's a bunch of different ones out there. They all help us. They all are, for the most part, capable of achieving the same kind of effects. Or maybe you're wanting to record musicians for your music, and you do that kind of thing. Again, as I said, the Foley artist example, going out and recording sound effects and processing them for your games and things like that. When it comes to implementing sound effects for your game, make sure that the sound effects are louder than the music. So I like to say that sound effects are what bring your game world to life, right? And they give your player audio cues. They tell your player that things are happening in the game. Even in real life, there's sounds all around us. Like there's this fan droning in the background, right? So I like to say that sound effects, help bring the game world to life. And music helps establish the mood of the game. So, overall I'd say that sound effects should be louder than the music. And if you want to implement your sounds into Unity, you have to be a bit familiar with that. If you want to do some fancy things, you might want to use some C# there. And also, audio and art go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Hey.
So, if you're an audio designer, or if you have an audio designer on your team, make sure to talk to the person who is doing art for your game. Or have your audio designer talk to the person who's doing art for your game, so that you can properly create sound effects and music that go with the visuals that the player is seeing as they play your game. And also, when it comes to time and things like that, the same, as Henry said earlier with art, the same thing applies to audio. Give us time to work on things. Don't ask us for things when you quote unquote need them. Let us work on things and show you works in progress. Especially if you have an audio designer on your game team. Please request assets from Audio Strike as soon as possible. We've only received 3 requests this quarter, and I'm wondering how the end of the quarter is going to be with people requesting assets. We'll see about that. But yeah, if you request things at the end of the quarter, chances are we're not going to get everything done. Same with art. And I think that's about it there. But you don't really have to deal with scaling and things like that, like artists do. But one thing you might notice if you have an audio designer on your team, or if an audio designer sends you assets, is that they might have their music in some sort of compressed file, like an MP3 or an OGG, and they might have their sound effects in uncompressed audio files, like a WAV file, because music is longer than sound effects. Sound effects are very short, and if you had uncompressed audio files with all your music, that would take up a pretty decent amount of space in your game project. So, yeah, that's about it. Are there any questions on audio? Cool. Thank you guys for listening. Let's see who's next. Production!
Me.
All right.
Boy, sit down.
Be humble.
All right, guys. So I'm Kiara. I'm a productions officer, and we're gonna learn about production. It's gonna be fun. All right. So we're gonna start off with what is a producer. All right. So word for word from our productions workshop, a game producer works more like an overseer for the entirety of the team. They objectively analyze the progress, the individuals, how they're working, any obstacles that come along the way, and they try to find solutions to any concerns. And yeah, that's what we do. Professionally, though, that also branches into licensing and budgeting and all that stuff, but we're not going to talk about that right now because that's more business-esque, and I don't know that stuff. But to accomplish our role as a producer, we focus on things like scheduling and organizing, scoping, communication, and solving problems. That's pretty much the majority of what we do whenever we produce. So, being a producer is kind of, it's a little weird in that we don't have like a task that we do. It's more like we just take all you guys, take our team, and then we kind of like oversee things. So it isn't very, you don't need much specific skill for that. So some people may ask, okay, well, why get a producer when a team lead can just take on this role? Well, try taking all the chaos that ensues during a quarter or during a game project, like say Steve isn't showing up throughout the whole game, or like Scope is suddenly not going to make it to the deadline, or mechanics aren't working, all that stuff. Stressing about all those little things, it really hinders you from performing your task. If you ever tried being a team lead and you're like a programmer or a writer, overseeing and addressing these concerns really takes up your time and you aren't able to focus on the task at hand. So rather than take up your time worrying about all those things, just throw it on a producer and they'll take all the stress for you, you know? So it really helps you focus on what you want to do, and then the producer will just take all that, you know? They'll figure it out. Don't worry about this fire in the corner of the room. The producer will handle it. So yeah, it ain't easy. It really gets stressful towards the end of the quarter when you realize, oh my God, we have a get fire, oh my God, our scope is too big. So being a producer, having a producer on your team is really helpful in that situation. Yeah, so although we tell you what to do, although we have a schedule, and although we have these restraints and we try to like command you and all that stuff, in the end, we're not supposed to be a tyrant. We're supposed to work for the team members. Our goal is everyone's collective goal on the team, right? We work towards what your best interests are. Whether it's learning, whether it's creating a product, we take what your vision is and we do our best to make it a reality. So, this authority that we're given as the head of the team, it is a right that you guys give to producers. So if you have something that you want out of this project, out of the development team, out of this experience, you have to communicate it to the producer, because if you want something and we're not achieving it, then we're not doing our job, we're not doing what we want to do, which is help you guys accomplish what you want. So communication is the biggest thing about a development team. It's what keeps a team together. It's what makes everyone know, okay, what's going on, what's happening, what's the situation of the project. So yeah, just if something's going on, if you're a team member, something's going on, make sure you communicate it to your producer so that we know what the situation is. And then please listen to your producer. Make sure you are keeping an open ear out for anything they ask of you, or anything they want, any information they want, because this communication is necessary for the success of the project. So yeah, help us help you. Producers do their best, so help us do our best. And yeah, any questions about that? All right, good evening. programming.
Wow.
Alright, come on up, Blake.
How about let Eli to do the programming presentation? Yeah.
You want to do E-Type?
Yeah, sure.
Alright.
Yo.
Yes. Good to see you.
He's
E-Type
here.
workshop.
Wait, did you write this?
No,
Who wrote this?
I don't know. Tyler or Greg. I think they used the things like
Perfect.
last year.
Oh, then I probably wrote this.
Wow.
Wait, what?
What does a programmer do? So, we look at your computers and are like, y'all is stupid, do this. Essentially, we're the ones who tell the computer what to do. Forcefully, through a lot of
Forcefully. And relate.
Also, another thing we do is essentially build tools for the rest of the team to use. So, like Unity, built by a programmer. Big surprise. So, there's a lot of different things that programming in games can cover. There's literally like 1,000,002 things. Here's a list of everything, and by everything I mean like maybe like 1/100th of everything. Although I see shaders on there, which is my everything. So character controllers, AI, level scripting, physics and collision. Unity handles a lot of that in the back end for you, although I found that Unity's collision stuff tends to be tied in with their physics, which is no end of problematic stuff happening. Shaders, which are never problematic ever. Object state machines, which should be finite state machines or finite state machines. Any desired logic or behavior within reason. Don't ask me to program in like a ray tracer into Unity. That's kind of whack. And more. So whatever the machine needs to know about the programmer must tell it. Unless you bought an asset online, Unity won't know how to fire a gun for you. I've seen a lot of really fun, messed up code about how to do certain things in Unity, and yeah. Like, I once helped this is a total tangent. I once helped a person who had misunderstandings about how Unity was supposed to work, so they wrote it so that their bullets, they had a gun class, and their gun class fired bullets, except for the gun was also the bullet. So bullets could shoot other bullets. And every bullet iterated through the entire hierarchy and updated every bullet's transform. So essentially what was happening was they would shoot, they would have a gun that was actually a bullet that would shoot other bullets, and then if they hit space again, it would add more bullets into the scene, and the bullets would get faster. However, this never happened because they had exceptions throwing like crazy. It took me like an hour to debug it because in the little console thing in Unity, they had clicked exceptions off. It took me so long to solve that. But yeah. So, providing tools for the rest of the team. So, you ever like do something and you're like, this is repetitive and I hate it? One of the things, like the core tenets of programming, is mitigating busy work and mitigating route like things. So say if, hey, you know, every time I import this sprite, I have to set it to point or whatever, and I have to do these very particular things. Well, a programmer could build you a tool that essentially on import for these kinds of objects goes through and sets everything up appropriately. So, specific to Unity, popular game engine, I would hope game objects have properties exposed so that anyone can tweak values according to the desired design of the game, and programmers should provide these properties as much as possible. So I don't know who wrote that last sentence. Personal opinion, actually no. There is a certain time where you want separation of concerns. As a programmer, I don't want all of my variables accessible at all times. Personal opinion. Having everything be public is fine, but in terms of defensive and good programming, like style, you probably actually want to do getters and setters and set things to private or like serialized private or system.showInInspector private. Just a little bit of safety. The principle, while hard-coding the speed of your main character is not functionally different from making a public variable, it becomes a very big issue when someone wants to change it but don't know how. Yeah, I know that feeling. I've definitely done that before where I've hard-coded something that, like, 50 minutes into toying around with variables, I'm like, man, maybe I should just make this public and stop flipping between this and VS Code. So yeah, if you have to toy around with something, make it public. And then make it private, if it doesn't make sense that it needs to be messed around with. This principle of availability applies to any game engine you use. Designers, artists, musicians, writers are using the engine too. They need your help. So, I shouldn't say every because I'm not sure about every, but essentially, like, the game engine isn't just for us. It's not just for programmers. Everyone else needs to interact with it too. A programmer's job should slightly be to make it easier for everyone else to interact with the system by giving you public variables and whatnot. Programmers must be able to explain their work so the rest of the team can understand it at a high level. Communication is crucial to the role of a programmer. Yes, but I hate commenting.
Ew.
If you ask me, and you should be able to explain anything you write, it's one of the #1 reasons why I kind of don't trust nor like Stack Overflow. One of the #1 things I see with new programmers is they'll copy pasta things from Stack Overflow haphazardly, which leads to me pointing out a line of code and being like, what this do? And them saying, I don't really know. And that kind of is like a bad thing. You should be knowing vaguely what your like system is actually doing. If you don't, how are you ever going to fix it when it breaks? You should understand your own code well enough to explain it in simple vocab to someone else. And also you should comment it. Don't be like me, comment it. This is the bridge between design and programming. If the high-level explanation does not match the design requirements, then the code needs revision. Or, you know, maybe the design should stop.
Hey. We iterate.
Designers will iterate on design in certain cases where, hey, you're going to have to do a shit ton of extra programming or have to throw away a lot of programming. I wouldn't cry over that kind of spilled milk. Programming is relatively cheap once you understand how something works. It's very simple to fix it. I saw Kyle on the first game he ever pitched take what was essentially a turn-based game and turn it into a racing game because he had just adjusted the code in ways that made it work, which is always fun. Bye, Riley. Talk to him about, oh God, what was it called? It was like Spiral Drift or something along those lines.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was like a turn-based, like, let's race spaceships between planets and the gravity will affect things. And he did a really good job, but at some point he was like, well, what if this is in real time and what if it's like a racing game, kind of? And he essentially took a turn-based game where you choose your vectors very carefully into a, hey, look at me do sick drifts around the sun. So I wouldn't cry over spilled code. That being said, designers, please don't request a feature from us that takes us literally like 4 weeks and then not have us use it. There's nothing worse than being told, hey, I need an inventory system, and then being told later, I don't think we need an inventory system because,
That
hey,
was bad.
yeah. Like there is certain things where just like designers and programmers need to meet in the middle in terms of what gets cut and what doesn't get cut. In a place where we have like a year or like 2 years of iteration time, like rewriting 300 lines of code is really trivial, but if you're asking us to rewrite 300 lines of code when we have like 3 hours to do it, to keep the wheels turning amidst the challenges of game development and reality, programmers must keep their communication lines open. Yeah, if your programmer is not talking to you, that's a problem. I think that can be said about everyone on your game team, but programmers have a very particular way of communicating. If you talk to a programmer and are not a programmer, you probably recognize these patterns. As someone who interacts with a lot of programmers on the daily, I see these patterns. They think about things in a very particular way. They will say things in a very particular way. They will use jargon. That jargon is not meaningless to them. It's not buzzwords to them. It's not empty to them. Trust me when I say that a dynamically allocated versus statically allocated variable does mean something, and it means something important to me. But please understand that, like, hey, look, we're going to communicate the way we communicate. At some point, you're going to have to slap us and say, English, please. Or you're going to have to essentially throw away half of the jargon in our sentence and just kind of try to extrapolate based on that. Do the slap first. I think most programmers kind of need a slap on the head in terms of communicating what they are doing to everyone else. But that's me. And also, I'm like kind of toes in tech art, so we are the most personable of programmers. honestly, if you go online and look at tech artists, they're all like super artistic and like social and like the nicest people. It's really weird. Programming pitfalls. On top of communication breakdown, programmers should also be aware of life, classes, family, getting sick, time management in general. Mastering this is unlocking the power of life itself. Yeah, so programmers are habitually busy. Programming classes here are kind of wacky and tough, and can get in the way pretty badly, especially if you're in a PATIS class or one of those early intro classes. Brutal. Standard coding practices, commenting code, and standard conventions of the language you're using. I wish this was covered in more classes, and I wish this was covered better in general. But there are standards about how you're supposed to write certain things. It does make everyone's life easier if you follow these standards. It makes your code so much more understandable and readable. Like, hey, where does the capitalization go? Where does this go? When should I use all caps? When should I use underlines? Hey, maybe I shouldn't just make everything public. Maybe I shouldn't make everything public static. Performance. Please don't write anything that's O of n cubed. If you're writing something that's O of n cubed, you are going to run into performance issues regardless. Please understand that, like, these games need to run very fast. It's not like a Python script where you can loop through something 1,000,002 times and just be fine with it because, hey, it's only iterating through this. There's a lot going on, and you need to make sure you're optimized. And version control. Actually, as a programmer, I think version control is the easiest thing for us because, and I don't think we like push this hard enough. But the nice thing about Git is that it only pushes your changes, and you can see everyone here has learned Git Bash, I assume, because Ryan did Git Bash. But you can do Git status and essentially see the list of files you've touched, and if there's anything in there that you should not have touched, Git check out whatever that file is. I actually think for programmers it's relatively easy because you explicitly know what you touched. But that's my opinion. I've definitely seen programmers like hard tank Git repos before. Never push force, or never like force your push. I literally had a friend earlier today explain to me that one of his teammates did a force push and it just merge conflicted their main scene from here to hell, so be careful about that. Don't sweat it. I almost thought that. I messed up the spelling between sweet and sweat for a second there in my brain. I was like, why did they spell it that way? It's okay to admit you can't do everything yourself. You're not John Carmack. How many of you don't know who John Carmack is? So he's pretty much the guy who made Doom, programming-wise. It used to be that platformers were impossible on PCs. Like, if you had an NES and you had a PC, the NES was infinitely more powerful than your PC. You could not do a platformer on a PC. And then he's like, lol, let me make a platformer on a PC, and he totally did it. He's a very, very smart man who has done a lot of great things. John, he now works on VR and I believe rocket ships.
He's basically the equivalent of a god in programming.
Yeah.
Like, he's 40 years old and he's done so much in his life.
Wait, he's only 40?
He's old. He has to be 44.
I remember looking it up, he was like 40 something.
That one's also crazy. He made a tweet recently where he's like, me and my family started watching One Punch Man. I enjoyed it so much, I've been doing the One Punch Man like training exercises every day, which is like a 10-kilometer run every day, and I'm like, John, what? Excuse me?
Also, he's 48.
Yeah, he's 48.
Jeez.
And he's done so much.
Google will help you find what you need, and if that doesn't work, then let the team know about your issue ASAP. Someone in the club can step in and guide you personally, or the design can be altered if necessary. Hey, can the design be altered if necessary?
I mean, possibly.
Alright.
He's worth $40 million, and he was the lead programmer on Doom, Quake, Rage, and Commander Keen, whatever that is.
Wait, was that last one?
Commander Keen?
Oh, Commander Keen was the platformer.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so Google, I was sitting down helping someone write a shader recently, and I was literally alt-tabbing at the speed of light between Google and Visual Studio. Google is your best friend. Learn your Google foo. I will say that if you're coming from something else and are trying to use your Google foo for programmer Google stuff, it doesn't work. Programmer Google foo has like a different form of Google foo. You don't need complete sentences. Fuck complete sentences. Just type in like 3 vague words, and I find that I usually find what I need. Like Unity get component where, Alright.
Solved.
Yeah, and you know, the documentation for Unity. Fun fact, I've actually found that the search function for Google is faster than trying to search something in the Unity docs.
Yeah.
It's really wacky. It doesn't make any sense why their search function is so slow. But yeah, Google is your best friend. And if you hate Google, use Bing. If you hate Bing, use Yahoo. If you hate Yahoo, use DuckDuckGo, I guess. And you'll be fine. Programmers, you'll be fine.
That's about it.
Where's Riley?
He already did.
Oh, cool.
Is it all of us?
Well, no.
We're done.
Yeah. We're done, yay!
All right.
So you have any questions for us while we're here?
Y'all want to talk about shaders?
Yeah.
Shader. What is shader?
Alright, let's do shader work. Fuck it.
Oh my god.
Yay!
I need to dodge my homework.
What's a shader?
I'm gonna make you a shader.
What's
What
a shader?
What kind of shader y'all want?
Transparent shader.
I want a shader for.
Lens flare.
No,
Shader is
I don't know how to
basically
do that right
programmer art.
it's max level programming.
Sun
What's a shader?
God
Like
ray?
2D
Is that
light.
what it's called?
2D lighting? No, that's really difficult, man. I don't want to do that. I just want to do something quick and easy.
Glass.
Hair.
Water.
You laughed at
Make it
transparent shader.
make a hairy ball.
Make
You
it
wanted to
trans-
be quick and easy.
Do the bottle, the cursed bottle from our game.
Oh, bottle.
Staticify.
Wait,
Water.
what did the bottle need to do?
Just be a
So
bottle.
the bottle was made
Glass.
of Unity primitives, but we wanted to make it transparent.
Transparent.
Oh, so semi-transparent.
But it's like we're because we were trying to do the diversifier. So it's like
Oh, okay.
I was trying to like delete some of the stuff.
I remember vaguely.
I thought it's already transparent. It's not.
No, because like geometry, the default shader is opaque.
Shader.
But I think
I
there's
saw
like a
the
built-in
glass
one for
shader.
that.
I thought that means glass.
Is there?
So
Like,
Itai just took over the IGD workshop.
Yeah,
but
get
no,
fucked,
we have to
everyone.
do it. It's really part of
We're just
it.
gonna leave this in.
Yeah.
It's good to leave the
Alrighty,
notes.
never mind.
Oh, it's streaming?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It's been
you're
Wow.
right.
Wait,
We
is
can
there
stop
a
it
camera or
now.
is it just
No,
casting
we're
the
gonna leave it
screen?
in.
No, we're leaving it in. We're
Yeah,
playing
bonus
30 minutes.
30-minute shader workshop.
It's the shader workshop -1.
Negative one.
Buddy.
You mean 0?
Well, if it's -1, that means it's at the end of the override.
It's the trail of.
So this is the
Shader
we're actually
workshop.
watching the
So,
last
yeah.
shader
So,
workshop.
yeah, what exactly did the bottle need to do?
Be transparent.
It just be transparent, but the problem we were having was because Brian made it out of Unity primitives, like a cylinder would go inside the sphere. And so it's just
Oh, okay, I see the problem. Ooh, yeah.
because we were like, we're gonna try to.
Oh, so it's.
Ah,
Because if it's just a regular transparency, that's not bad.
massive vouchers. Yeah, no, that's.
And we were like stuck on that for a while.
I no, I don't know how to
Oh, that's
deal
what
with
you
that.
were doing. That's
So
why-
wait, so the problem was that it was transparent, but you wanted it so that like you had essentially like the bottle and then the handle of the bottle, or sorry, like the neck of the bottle.
Yeah.
There are
shit,
two
what's this
different
thing?
parts.
You're just
Fine.
eating tortilla.
What's tortilla?
Tortillas are delicious.
I mean, yes, but
It's
oh, you know what? No, it's a quesadilla, isn't it?
It's the bread in
Which is fine.
Penthouse.
Except this part, we
In
made it with
hell?
a sphere.
And
You can see the sphere when we
Oh
make
no,
transparent.
that's
then what's this?
something else. This is like Latin American Mexican. It's just corn and
Alright, whatever.
lard.
That's gonna be hard. I think
Corn
I
and
can do
lard
it, but
and
that's
bacon.
gonna be kind of
Not
wild.
familiar with
Yeah.
Take a tiny piece.
Because
with
like
the
you
little
have
spoon
to
in
wait
it.
some things are like
Oh gosh, yeah. How would you do that?
Change to the art asset.
Yeah.
Done.
Don't use Unity primitives.
I mean, that's actually like the correct answer, but do you want the wild answer?
What?
I'll give you the wild answer.
Yes.
No.
Where's my Unity?
I want a wild answer. I was like looking this up, like how? And we just gave up on it because we spent so much time.
There you go. Stuff is happening.
And so, like,
Wow.
is it click initially? So it's like the very beginning of the game, you just tap. Eventually, you
Man, my only answer on Unity Answers has no legs.
What?
The answer on Unity Answers has no legs.
You can like yourself.
Oh, you're right. I can.
This is where I.
That's rotating.
Double
Wait,
click
that's
Oh, it's
ro-
rotation. I'm a double.
Oh, sorry, but you can. Wow, you cannot even like
It's
yourself.
very hard to see the screen. Why? Okay.
You're still editing rotation. Okay.
And then
Get my wire better.
Oh god, you made it big. Ew.
have enough.
Why a bullet?
I'm still
Hey Wayne, do you want a distraction?
Yeah.
A programming distraction?
So it starts
Wild
with
card.
I'm still
Alright, this is gonna be wild.
So I need position,
I would
to
never
always-
ever ever recommend doing
or
this.
rather, I need it to always be between 0 and 100.
Yeah, we're here. We are.
like these are charts. These are
But
the
if
matter
offset is greater than 1 and position is negative,
wire,
Bye.
solar farms.
or sorry, if offset is negative,
Bye
is
bye.
See
greater
ya.
than
Good
position,
morning.
then this statement is negative.
Good morning.
And like negative 32 mod 128 is still
Alright,
negative
let's see what
32.
this, let's see
Depending
what
on where I
script
am,
gives me.
will give me
If I give you code,
Yeah, it's gonna give me code?
Yeah.
Cool.
we set it to code.
Good. As it should. As all things
Do you
should
want
be.
a wild solution?
Hmm.
If you're
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, it gave me proper.
if it's higher than 0, if it's not, you add 128 and do this in the infinite while loop until it's larger than 0 at most.
Can I do that with another?
Alright, where do I put a graph?
This is an attractive solution.
Will this only be one time
Just generate-
So these are the things that generate so far.
So
hold
position
on.
can be any number from 0 to 127 at the beginning.
Graph
Per
has.
second.
Offset can be any number greater than 0.
Alright,
I
I
don't
have
know,
to explain
because
this
it was
when
the
I'm
thing
done, 'cause I
that
don't
dude
even know
that
if
created
it's gonna
this
work.
thought, yeah, sure, why not?
So essentially I need position to be
So
able
you
to
just
loop.
started like, it's just click.
Remove your position.
Yeah.
Remove your offset. Like,
And it's the
something
same
will
session.
that happen.
That's so wild that works.
So remove your offset to make sure it's lower than
Wait, no, hold on. I need to
128.
grab
I
it
can
before.
do that.
I need to-
That helps a bit.
Oh,
Let me
man.
see if that will
Okay,
have
hold
some
on.
problem. I'm not sure if that will give you the same and
It's not good.
as well.
No, actually, that's
I haven't thought
You
it
can't?
out.
Why not?
Just when it's
Violent. Wait, let me open it.
If I open it, then it just becomes, it just loads up this, cause it's a constant.
No.
It works while I'm
It's
offline.
128.
Oh, okay.
What is your IP?
What I will do is that
So this is the
remove
most
this
wild-
It's,
128, and
if
after I
you
subtract,
Google
I add 128
paper
in the
clips,
end, and then I use these hostings to
you'll,
most
it should
128.
go up.
How, so, okay. What happens if I mod this by negative 128?
Game, subshare.
I don't know, are we supposed
Oh,
to
it's
mod
before
this
the
with
time.
a negative number?
Hmm?
I have to research
Wait,
that
wait,
more
sorry.
because I feel like what you're talking about with the infinite while loop
It's just not
is essentially
initial.
a weird mod.
And then eventually
We don't know how
enough that
that
it gives you
works,
these
and
little
actually
tags that
now
I have
I'm
down
thinking
here,
about
that based on how many paper clips I have, by that.
Because I do think we should mod
the button.
this one.
Uh,
But just, even if it's like,
move on or whatever.
What is that error saying?
these to make sure it's always fine.
Oh, it sells by itself.
this may be a very smart
So if
solution.
I raise the money,
I must verify it in my head.
demand. Why is the backspace so small? Make it down to 0.
If you drop it down, if you drop your, oh, you drop your demand down
Yeah,
zero,
but it still it rises over time.
super slowly, depending on the percentage of demand. Percentage of demand is where,
I think it'll work, right?
So if I run
he was
out of
looking at it, and
wire,
it's like, what is this?
if I run out of wire, then I kind of
Let's try it.
and I can't sell anything, then I lose at that point. Okay.
But
Is there an explicit?
you have unsold.
Whoa.
inventory.
Yeah, but if I have
It's transparent.
Is there
fuck?
is there explicit loss in the game where it's just lost?
I don't know.
why it
This is desired behavior.
That is hella undesired behavior. Hold on. Oh, it's because I.
Excellent, mod.
Yeah.
Wait, I called you mod, not Wayne.
What's mod?
Mod is a function we were just doing.
Oh.
So yeah,
Good job, Mod.
Because it doesn't generate wire by itself.
No.
Right?
It's
like an Onion article, right?
Hooray.
What is
I'm
it?
gonna,
You
we're
run
gonna
out
be
something, you run out
memorializing
wire.
the
That's
comments.
not an Onion article, but that is
But
like.
it's,
Hooray
What's fake?
for-
how do you run out
The
of?
loot box
Yeah.
is.
How do you run out of money?
Loot box fire
Fire
rate
fire.
shit.
Oh, the pink slips?
Well, I mean, if you run out of money by
Remember the thing of
putting the public demand way too
I
low.
learned something very valuable
like
today.
wasn't it like employees got a loot box that has 8% chance
Structs
of
and classes
flip?
are fundamentally
Oh.
different.
The lower
Structs are
Interesting.
passed by copy.
yeah, the fucking
It's ass.
CSO got kicked.
It's because structs are made
The
up
way that
of
you
primitive
do
data
it
types,
is
so
that.
in C they're passed by copy.
That's so ass.
Oh.
That literally cost me like 3 hours and 40 minutes today.
Oh.
For
Yeah,
what?
out of wire because you
Okay, so essentially, I have a coroutine, right?
Click this, it'll buy wire.
Before that, I have a vector 3 array
I don't think so.
and a line renderer, and these have to be kept together
Why
because they
would you buy like?
reference it specific one. So I put them into a struct, of course, to keep them together.
Yeah.
I pass the coroutine the struct because it needs both of them and it needs the
Yeah.
specific
Oh, the
ones.
auto clipper just came off. Okay.
And the coroutine does its thing and it modifies
Hey,
it,
you already bought.
but
So can
I
buy-
couldn't,
buy
even though
multiple auto clippers.
it's a public variable,
They simultaneously
fast.
click.
I couldn't access
Each
it
one
from the
clicks
notes.
it as much as
Uh,
possible.
Each
Uh,
note
I
spawns
think
as the game is going on,
Okay.
and the notes would just
Okay.
act
And
like
they buy wire
the
by
thing was in the
themselves too?
state that it was at the beginning of the game.
There's another.
The points would update though, because of course the coroutine is modifying the points, and the point was an even higher public variable, so it was just referenced.
Okay.
But the offset wouldn't, and I was like, why the shit isn't this offset changing? I can go over it in the debugger with a break right here, mouse over it, and it will show me 88 here, and this script over here, same run, I just go to the next line, it's 0. Same variable. What the fuck? It's because the coroutine was copying the whole struct. Points, arrays are just a pass by reference in the first place. So the array was constant, but the integer offset is going to be,
kill me.
it's just within the struct. It's getting passed by copy.
Uh,
The coroutine is making a new copy for itself to operate on. If I just change struct to class, Wayne helped me with a little bit of a mod function, so that stuff stays in range. Works.
So they
Nice.
deleted it.
4 hours,
Because they
almost.
just- it was a neat
A little
one.
under 4 hours.
ouch.
You want to see what it does?
Oh. Nice.
Now things can loop around and change shape and do all this crazy shit, and the notes will still find their way from the correct place to the correct place.
Well,
So I was like submitting.
I kinda did the thing you wanted.
Let's take a look.
It's actually whack and not what you wanted, but
Oh,
it's a
hey.
What?
reflective bottle.
So it's
It's
transparent.
very reflective.
It's see-through as well.
Oh, it's like a see-through.
See-through.
Yeah, it's
That's
it's
what
like a
transparent means.
Oh, it's like a lens.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
yeah, I'm not like,
Interesting.
yeah, don't really know why that's happening. How does grab pass work when I'm trying to, okay, hold on.
So
Grab
kind
pass.
of, yet not.
So shaders are like materials in Maya or Cinema 4D.
materials
Okay, I
are.
think I can explain it. Okay, so shaders are essentially so like, it's hard to compare shaders in Maya and Cinema 4D because it's kind of like they have built-in shaders that you kind of can note together.
Yeah.
Essentially what I'm doing here is really, really wacky. I would not recommend doing this ever. I think there's a better way of doing it. I'm just trying to figure that out right now. But essentially what I did is I did something called a grab pass. Now what a grab pass does is essentially if something is transparent, it will grab the texture behind it.
Okay.
And then what I did was essentially I said like, hey, take, yeah, essentially. It is though. And then essentially what I did is I said, okay, now map the texture of whatever's behind it onto the object. So it probably took like a square image of whatever was behind, or like it probably took a square image of like the entire screen and essentially wrapped it around the object. Which is really wild when you think about it. But there's definitely better ways to do this. I'm trying to think what's like the best way.
It sounds so simple when it explains it, but it just looked like black magic on screen.
Map it onto the UVs of the object you can see.
I'm trying to remember, is there is screen position, screen space, I'm trying to remember, it's just screen UV, okay. Oh, right, okay. Cool. So, let's do that, let's see if this is a little better.
Just copy paste.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yes.
Is the TV messed up? Okay. I'm like, gives them like the dots. I'm like, are the dots supposed to be on there?
The dots are supposed to be on there because the screen's dying.
Okay.
which is such a-
No, I'm just like, it's not the computer.
No, it's not the computer.
It's not. It's just the screen. Okay, the
If you
TV.
get a new TV, it won't happen.
Okay.
Whoa.
Gotcha.
Meantime, we can all
Nice.
just wear
That
lead
looks
vests.
pretty good actually.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
yeah. Wait, what did you
Hey.
do different?
Hold on. Hey!
Whoa!
Hey, there it is.
Cool.
The
Well, you
transparent
did
bottle.
it.
Yeah, I do
Transparent
it.
bottle.
did it.
I do it.
And it was done in like 10 minutes.
Go down. That makes it more.
It was done in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. But like, in all fairness, this is like super inefficient. Grab pass is really inefficient. It's literally like, if you can do it any other way than grab pass, do it any other way than grab pass.
I couldn't.
Generally, well, I mean that's
Cool.
fair. You were making it out of Unity primitives. So essentially, what I did was, God, how am I gonna explain this? So essentially, like, oh, sorry. So what's happening? Why we're not seeing this sphere underneath here is because essentially, like, we're actually mapping. We're not doing transparency. We're essentially mapping whatever's behind this as a texture on top of it.
Okay.
And then the way we're doing that is via screen space UVs. So that's a little bit more confusing. Essentially, it means that whatever is on here is essentially a continuation of whatever's not there.
Mm-hmm.
The best way I can think of explaining it is like how, gosh, I'm trying to find a good explanation, but like, here, I'm gonna pull up a Lyndon Reed.
Yee.
I'm gonna pull up his stuff because he's really good, and I totally stole some of this from him. Not that.
Wasn't
not
he at the
that.
game jam?
He was.
He's
Okay.
giving a presentation in Capstone tomorrow.
I want to go to that.
Can we crash it?
I mean, I don't know. There's a limited amount. Hold on, custom diffuse. Where is it? Is it
Maybe
X-ray?
it's
It's not X-ray effect.
Would it be an ice shader?
Ice shader would
Ice
probably be-
shader.
Glass
It's,
with
Glass shader.
Last
Oh.
shader, third.
it's not that. I know which one it is. Camera effect, waving grass, custom diffuse, ice shader. Maybe it's NHL color. Where is it? Where is it? Dissolve ice, glass shader, so
Huh.
good games blog, waving grass, custom diffuse, camera effect, heat distortion. Maybe it's texture. It's under texture. So they have a really good example. Alright, so if
it's
you look at chowder, all the texture on the character's cloth is essentially all one consistent
Whoa.
texture.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So like as they move, that moves with them.
Yeah.
Essentially, I'm doing that, where I'm taking the background and essentially saying, hey, that's the background layer that I'm punching a hole into. And because it's essentially not doing transparency, it's actually just slapping a texture on top of it. It looks like it's consistent and it looks transparent. In reality, it's actually not transparent. And because of the grab pass, it's actually really inefficient comparative to saying, oh, it's just transparent. However, if you really needed to build a bottle with Unity primitives, ta-da! That's the way
It
you
was
want
done in
it.
10 minutes, so he was pretty quick.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I mean, I need to remember that screen space thing because it's always like a really weird.
I'm not trying to imply anything. I'm just saying he did it in 10 minutes. Like he started at 7, it's like 7:15. He's done.
Oh, that's what's in screen position W. Wait, is that what's in screen position W? What's in screen position W?
Where is a screen position W?
You're a squeeze position W.
W component of in screen position. Dividing by W standard effective space. Oh, look at that map
Should
that I
we just
don't.
leave Sector's phone here?
You can't interpolate in perspective space,
Yeah.
only in orthogonal space. That's why you get the values in camera space.
Because I mean,
Well,
Quiet Labs on the
I don't
release
get it.
flag.
Can, but what if you
yep.
miss?
All right.
Yeah, what if
So,
he's not there?
That was the surprise shader workshop. If anyone was watching,
That was
bye.
fun.
Whoa.